G'day guys, how you doing? Great to have you here. I've got Mieke over here on this screen, chatting with you on this screen. Thanks for all joining. Make sure you hit the share button down below and share with your friends on social media. And of course, hit the like button to tell YouTube that this is going to be worth watching, because it absolutely is. I've been looking forward to this for forever, for 3 weeks or so since Mieke said that she was going to do this. It's really funny. She's over here laughing at me in the corner here. You can't hear her or see her just yet, but you're going to get that treat in a minute. Couple of things before I bring her on. Incredible photographer, one of my favorite photographers in the world. Inspirational. Her work is amazing, and it's not just my opinion, that is fact. The awards she's won, I'm going to embarrass her here. She sent me her awards list and I couldn't believe it. It was 4, maybe 5 A4 pages, Mieke, of just gold awards, winning competitions, everything. It was incredible. A couple of the highlights here I'll run through. 14 FIAP gold medals, absolutely incredible. To get 1 is a phenomenal result. To have 14 is just absolutely amazing. Victorian Travel Photographer of the Year for AIPP in 2018. Victoria Landscape Photographer of the Year, AIPP 2019. Last 3 years, she's been included in the top 101 landscapes for the International Landscape Photographer of the Year. And of course, the big one last year, Mieke won the 𝗟𝗡𝗏 2019 Panel Awards. Not only that, she had 3 gold medals. She won highest scoring aerial photo. She won the nature division, and of course she won overall. Let's welcome Mieke Boynton. I need some, woo, hang on, let me bring you on. Hang on, here we go. You are now live, clear, coming through. Mieke, how you doing?
What an introduction.
Oh, hang on, let me change the camera view here. Thanks, Mieke. Here we go. We're both here. We're both there. Yeah, thanks for joining me. Was that a good intro? I hope it was. It felt pretty good.
Pretty full on. Thank you, Adam.
Mieke, I mean, we met each other, last year for the first time, and we've only really, met each other a couple of brief times. So this is really great to have you on and learn more about yourself, more about your photography. Tell us a little bit about, I know you're going to go into some more detail, but just tell us a little bit about, yourself and your background and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I'm a mad keen landscape photographer, and that pretty much happened when I moved up to the Kimberley. I'd never seen colours like it before, but I'll say a bit more about that later. But loved the Kimberley, loved the colours, loved the landscapes, and just really got into photography that way. Was fortunate enough to be able to make it my full-time thing at the end of 2017, and yeah, I can't imagine a better life than what I've got. So that's, what's better than that?
Awesome. A couple of quick things. I also want to just mention quickly, in the description below, Miekes' website is there, so you can see more of her work. You can also like her page on Facebook, follow her on Instagram. But Mieke also does online workshops, and we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe at the end. They're selling out quickly, but you can find the details below and get more information down in the description there about that. On that, Mieke, tell me a little bit about how you're coping with the upheaval that has been in the photography world, or everyone's world really, with the current health crisis.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock. I had just started my first in-person workshops and had 2 fantastic workshops here in Bright, northeast Victoria. And we really enjoyed it. We were, doing all the proper things like washing our hands and keeping our distance and all the rest of it. But, I just figured that was how it was going to pan out. And then no travel. So yeah, that was the end of 9 workshops, instantly gone in a second. Oh, wow. So then it was pretty much, well, either I sit in a corner and cry, or I figure out how to get these things online. And so that's what I've been doing. And I mean, I've really been enjoying them. So I assume that everyone else who comes is enjoying them too. But yeah, so everything that was going to be in person in Northeast Vic is now online. And yeah, everyone seems to be really enjoying them so far. So it's been crazy, but not necessarily like horrific. I know there are a lot of people who are
Sure.
really suffering through this period, and I just feel really grateful that you know, I had options.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. Everyone's over here. They're all going crazy, clapping and virtual claps. You're getting lots of virtual claps, which is new. Everyone's saying hi. We'll get some questions going in a moment. But how about, should we share the screen and we'll start having a
Yeah,
look at some of your
yeah,
incredible work?
yeah. So I'm going to share some photos that Adam has picked out to. Oh, hang on. I just have to give me just 2 seconds because I showed you my pictures first and now it's not on the first screen.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine.
All right.
Julie Cook says she highly recommends your
Oh,
online
thank you,
workshops.
Julie. All right, here we go. Now we're on track. Okay, so you wanted to have a little look at this one.
I did. The thing that really draws me into this one, and a lot of people go to the Kimberley specifically to try and track down these beautiful boabs and get that beautiful sunset, maybe silhouetted sunset shot. But I've been to the Kimberley 2 times and travelled through there pretty extensively. And look, if I saw one composition as isolated and as good as this, it would have been an absolute miracle. I don't think I saw any though. Like, tell us how difficult it is to find boab trees that are actually not all huddled together, giving each other a big cuddle.
Yeah, I have to admit, you know, once I knew there were boabs in the Kimberley, I was expecting to find, you know, lone boabs or you know, strips of boabs with silhouettes at sunset. You know, I just thought they'd be everywhere, and they're really not. It's like the biggest myth ever. These guys are actually, I can't even tell you properly how to get there because it's a bit hit and miss. I went there 3 times knowing that they were there without actually finding them. But you have to drive out on the mud flats.
I thought so, yeah.
Obviously, when they're dry and not wet, you drive out on the mud flats, you go out past the back of the Derby Airport, then you go around a little bit of a dog leg, and then you have to like sneak into this path that kind of doesn't quite look like they're there. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there they are. So yeah, they are really hidden. They're not really just there for everyone. But I love these boabs, and I call it Trinity because it's like, you know, you've got your big old mammoth in the middle, but the other 2 are almost like they're connected. You know, they mirror each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's really quite unusual. So they're a bit special, but boabs are special anyway. They're very special trees.
Oh, I love them. In fact, I love the Kimberley. I love the Kimberley. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that as we move on through. Wow. This is a pretty spectacular weather event going on here. Where are we? Where was this captured?
So this is in 𝗂𝗄𝗎𝗂 National Park in the Pilbara.
Yes.
And the colours of the Pilbara are amazing. So I was in the Kimberley for probably, well, most of that first year that I was up in the Kimberley. Everywhere I went, that I was just raving about the Kimberley and saying, you know, if you feel like you're the only person there, that like you're the first person ever there, it's just this incredible vast space, you know, all the walking tracks, you know, there's so many of them in gorges where you can't really tell where you're going. You have to really look for the little tiny little indicators that tell you that you're on the right path. So I was raving about the Kimberley, and then every time I was raving about the Kimberley, people kept saying, you need to go to 𝗂𝗂𝗎𝗂. I'm like, but I'm raving about the Kimberley. They're like, yeah, but if you love the Kimberley like this, you're going to love 𝗂𝗂𝗎𝗂. Anyway, so eventually I did go. This particular visit, I think it was at the end of the wet season. And wow, like there was lightning and thunder and everything, but this just being you know, at such a distance to these incredible clouds, like you know, you kind of felt like, you know, you had the time to compose, and it was but then it moves really quick, and all of a sudden I was like, oh shoot, I've got to go. Sprinted back to the car and only just made it back in before I got completely dumped on, and then it rained, you know, for quite some time thereafter. But
it looks like, is that part of Dale's Gorge there? It kind of looks like Dale's Gorge. Yeah. Okay. And was this the trip where you were with, you know, Christian Fletcher and Tony Hewitt and those guys, or not?
No, but I won't mention them at this stage because I will talk about that later because that
Okay,
was a very fun trip.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure. Well, I can't. That's an incredible photograph. The structure of that cloud and it just balances perfectly with that little hill there in the composition. Absolutely spectacular. All right,
It
let's
was
shift on.
very impressive.
Now, I didn't really know you as a really super talented black and white photographer until I went looking through your website for images that I would love to sort of feature and talk about. And I just love this. It has a softness, a really delicate black and white in its processing. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I used to really enjoy black and white photography when I lived in Melbourne. I think black and white photography is great for architecture. It's great for misty, foggy mornings. It's, you know, beautiful when the colors are not the most important part of the scene. But moving to the Kimberley, it was like, well, it would be an absolute crime to take color out of my photos from the Kimberley. So yeah, I enjoyed black and white photography, but when I was in the Kimberley, I hardly did any. And then since I've come back home to Northeast Vic, I've started to do a lot more black and white.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, and I especially like black and white waterfalls. This is 𝗀𝗵𝗋𝗄𝗆 on up at Mount Buffalo, and as you can see, it's got a fair bit of water flow, which it would at the moment too, except we're not allowed on it because, you know,
Yeah.
essential travel and all that. But I can't wait for it to reopen. Hopefully we're allowed on there when there's some snow this year, but I'm not sure that they will.
Yeah, Mount Buffalo is spectacular. How far from your place is Mount Buffalo? How long would it take to get there?
It's very close. So 𝗀𝗵𝗋𝗄𝗆, this waterfall is only probably 20 minutes.
Oh, awesome.
And then the top of Mount Buffalo, it's about an hour.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Is this?
Yeah, I'm very lucky. It's one of those really special places. I, you know, grew up here and knew that it was special, but didn't quite understand why. And then after living in the Kimberley, I was like, well, I think I know why. I think it's a place that's called people for thousands of years. And, you know, the Aboriginal people of this region used to have ceremony up there and harvest the bogong moths and, you know, have weddings and all that kind of stuff. And it's just one of those touchstone places. We have lots of them in Australia, but they're international as well. There have been, like when I was traveling through Namibia, I saw this amazing granite structure, and I said to the guy sitting beside me, I reckon there's rock art in that place. And literally 2 minutes later, 𝗀𝗵𝗋𝗄𝗆, who was running the tour, he said that's one of the best known areas for rock art in Africa. And I was like, you know,
Yeah. No, I know.
Some places are just special. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anyway, enough about that.
Absolutely.
Shall I do the next one?
Yeah, do that. 𝗏𝗃_Alexander. Do you know Marg, I guess? She says your black and white workshop is fantastic. Is that the one that's currently sold out, Mieke?
It is the one that's currently sold out, but I will be announcing June dates shortly. Thank you, Marg. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Awesome, awesome. Oh, look at this. I love the Northern Lights. These are the Northern Lights, I take it?
Yes, the Aurora Borealis, otherwise known as 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. This one, so I've got friends, Jens and Elizabeth, who actually live a stone's throw from this exact location. And I met Jens when I was traveling in Indonesia in 2014, I think it was. And he invited me to come to visit. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. And then he showed me a photo of his house with the aurora. And I was like, I'm coming, definitely coming.
Yeah, we can stay there.
So the first year that I visited, I stayed for a week, and that was not long enough. The second year that I visited, I stayed for 2 weeks, and that wasn't long enough. And then last year, I think it was last year. Yeah, I think so. I stayed for 3 weeks, and they put up with me for 3 weeks, and this was the nightly occurrence. And the Aurora Borealis is just stunning. It dances. It really dances. You feel like you're having a performance put on just for you. Incredible.
Yeah, tell me about the first time you ever witnessed it actually, you know, moving and dancing through the sky. What was that like?
Well, I didn't think that was actually real. I mean, I knew that like people had videoed it and stuff, but I didn't imagine that it would be like that in person. And it is up there, you know, it's so strong, and it just twists and turns and, you know, fades, and then you'll look over your shoulder and it's like going nuts over in the distance in the other direction. And have you seen it?
Yeah, once, a couple of times when it was on the horizon and just a sort of a faint glow, but once when it was, you know, when you could literally see it moving and sort of, you know, dancing across the sky, it was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes it ripples like a sheet, and
Yeah,
sometimes it streaks, you know, like someone's throwing it. And then, you know, this one, like it was just kind of swirling.
yeah, it looks
And I
like
was
one of
lucky
those.
enough
Yeah,
one night that it did a big swirl directly overhead, and that picture's actually behind me there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's called a corona, believe it or not.
Oh, there you go. Bit nicer than the current one though.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I
So
chose,
this one,
yeah, I chose
yeah,
this
this
because it's one
one.
of my favorite places in the world. Tell us about it.
So I went with 𝗂𝗵𝗪𝗀𝗀. Have you met Tanya?
Not personally, I've chatted, Facebook message, etc., etc. Yeah, and I've got one of her prints. Absolutely, we did a print swap. Really talented photographer, super talented.
She is, and I was very lucky that she lived in the Kimberley when I lived in the Kimberley. So we've done a lot of shooting together, and we planned this trip for quite a long time to Iceland. We went together, and we had seen some. YouTube's great for finding
Yeah,
information, and so we'd come across this. Everyone knows about 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏 and 𝗏𝗏𝗏s, but this 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is like a little bit less well known. And I was like, I really want to see that, really want to see that. So we got up at 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗏 and drove there, but it was completely covered over in cloud.
uh-huh.
And I'd found this pool, and I was like, you know what, these reflections are amazing. But I had to wait, because when a cloud is over a peak, it's like it has no head. You know, it's
Yeah,
like the mountain has no head, and
sure.
you can't take a portrait of something without a head. So I was just kind of waiting, lying on my stomach in the grass, in the wet, not in the best position, with my tripod in the water, with the camera like just over the surface of the water, waiting. Finally, it cleared, and I got my shot. And I was a bit, you know, I've always spoken about the waiting bit, but it turns out that almost always that mountain is covered in cloud. And so it was actually very lucky that I even got one shot. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, it's a
I
spectacular capture.
it's a spectacular mountain.
Mm. Love this one.
So this one is the Sahara Desert, and you can actually see there's a lot of texture on the sand, and that's
Yeah.
because the night before we'd had a light rain, which is, you know, unusual for the desert, really. And that became important later on, but it meant that, you know, there was this beautiful crunchiness to the sand. And I actually had to take 2 photos for this shot, because with the compression, with the telephoto lens, if I focused on the ridge in the foreground, the background was out of focus.
Sure.
And if I focused on the ridge, you know, towards the back, then the foreground was out of focus. So I ended up having to take 2 photographs and paint the one with the foreground in focus. I had to paint that over the top. But it was actually very, very lucky that it had rained the night before, because I would have got lost were it not for my footprints. Yeah, I was so enraptured. This sunrise was just incredible, and the way that it was like caressing the shapes of the dunes was just amazing. And I kind of got a little bit turned around, and all of a sudden realized, I've been walking for like an hour and a half, and I'm not quite sure what direction the car is in.
Oh, wow.
So fortunately, because of that rain, I was able to find my footprints and get back. But
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
you know, you really got to have your wits about you with landscape photography, and that can be hard sometimes when it's that spectacular.
Yeah, in a location, I suppose, like that, which tends to look very similar in all directions, right?
Yeah,
To a
yeah.
degree. Yeah, beautiful. I love this. I mean, it looks like, you know, you've composited a cloud over the hill. Is it a composite or is it one shot?
It's real. And that's
Ah,
why I love it so much. I call it floating, but Mum and John call it the cheeky little cloud. And that's exactly what it is. It just seems so incongruous. It just seems impossible that a cloud that's that fat and, you know,
yeah,
laden can just be hovering over a
that
hill
low.
like that.
Yeah.
But it is a real cloud. I was driving with my friend Claire, and you know, slammed on the brakes. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, the cloud. The cloud. We both like jumped out of the car and photographed this cloud, and literally within 3-4 minutes,
Yeah.
you know, the bit that's sticking out had just kind of extended and morphed, and it was not worth photographing. So we really were just there at the right time, because it was gone in minutes.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Ignacio at Uluru. The very first, wasn't the first tour, I don't think. It might have been our last tour at Uluru. And the very first time we were driving down for this particular trip with all the workshop photographers in the cars with us, we see Uluru, and I'm like, there's a lenticular cloud on Uluru. And I was like, me and Iggy just slam on the brakes into the gravel, sliding sideways, and we're all jumping out. And everyone on our workshop's like, what are these guys doing? We're like, this never happens. Quick, get your cameras out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it's very similar, little cute little lenticular cloud sitting above Uluru.
That's awesome.
Something you wouldn't expect to see, much like this one. I just can't believe that's a single shot. But, you know, nature's pretty incredible. And these things happen every now and again if you're lucky enough.
Yep.
Mm.
So I think that's it for those shots to talk about. So do you want me to launch into?
Yeah, go for it. So just before you do, Mieka's now going to run through a bit of a presentation, and I'm going to mostly sit back and enjoy. But if you guys have some, I should be looking up there. If you guys have some questions, put them in the chat, because I've got the chat going over here, and I'll be able to jump in and pass those questions on to Mieke as they come through. So I'll let you go ahead, Mieke. And
thanks, Adam. Okay, so a little bit of background for me. I thought you'd like some happy snaps. When I was actually born in Daylesford in Victoria, and then shortly thereafter moved to 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏 and stayed until grade 3 in Buronga, which is near Mildura. And then in grade 3 moved to Myrtleford, which is near where I am now. And my brother and sister and I grew up skiing on Mount Buffalo when you could ski on Mount Buffalo. And I loved art when I was growing up, but I also loved sport. And my dad is a mad keen rower. He's very talented. And he got me coxing a boat when I was 6. And so rowing was part of my life from when I was, or maybe I was 7. Maybe I'm embellishing a little. But anyway, I was coxing from pretty early on, and then got into rowing. And that led me to be selected on the state team when I was 18. And then we won at the Nationals. And then I got a rowing scholarship to America. And the end of the first year of that rowing scholarship in the States, we actually won the English Henley Regatta, which was pretty crazy. This does have a point, by the way. So then I spent 4 years on that rowing scholarship in the States, got pretty badly injured, but, you know, you push through. We won a lot of different races, graduated after 4 years, came back to Australia. Didn't really know what to do because I had an arts degree, but it was in literature. I had done a few art classes while I was over in the States, which was great. And that's been really helpful for me now, because I learned about colour and drawing and all that kind of stuff. And then after a few years teaching, because I went and got my teaching credentials, and I taught year 9, 10, 11, 12 drama, English and religion. And then I got this crazy opportunity to join the Australian bobsleigh team, and went on a tour with them we started in America and then went across to Europe and competed in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy. And it was because the pilot and the brakewoman, Kylie Reid and Astrid Lock-Wilkinson, they were pushing to be qualified for the 2006 Winter Olympics in Torino. And I was their reserve brakewoman. So the three of us spent a whole, I think it was about 5 months, traveling all around with our bobsleigh in the Europe car van in the back, studying maps at night and figuring out how to get to the next location. And so that was a pretty crazy experience. And there's nothing like being in a bob. Like this picture over on the right here, that is the track. It's almost vertical in places. And so like you travel at speeds of up to 135 k's an hour. As the brakewoman, you've got your head down, you can't even see. So it's like black, it's fast, it's furious, and it's freaking amazing. Loved it, loved every minute of it. And yes, we qualified. So Kylie and Astrid qualified, and we were at the 2006 Winter Olympics in Torino and came, what did we end up coming? 14th. So that's pretty awesome. So then after that incredible year, teaching in the outer suburbs of Melbourne was a little less exciting for me, and I decided that I wanted to go on another adventure. And so I travelled up the guts of Australia and got to Wyndham in the East Kimberley. And as I mentioned before, loved the colours. The colours were amazing, and pretty much just started happy snapping to capture the beauty of the Kimberley and send back to family and friends. And then that year also, I met an amazing teacher who had a ute that was just literally decked out, ready to go at the drop of a hat. And I was like, that is so cool. I want to do that. And you know how it is, like when you can just hit the road and be free as a bird and just, have everything you need in your vehicle. So, you can just be out bush for days. I was like, wow, this is incredible. So I hired a ute from Kandinsky and I travelled, did the loop, went to Halls Creek and went to Pernalulu, the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, and then came back along the Gibb River Road and stopped at every single gorge. And I was on a mission. To go into every single gorge. So I really wasn't experiencing the real Kimberley at that point in time. It was just like, I want to go to every gorge because I can go to every gorge. And that's changed very much now. But when people say that they've done places, like I've done 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃 and I've done, I get that mentality. It's like it's a challenge. But I like to say now that you experience a place, and that's a very different feeling. So I'm glad that I got that out of my system. So 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃, you mentioned, I went on a workshop. So after hearing that everyone was raving about this place, 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃, I was reading a magazine, and it said there was a photography workshop in 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃, and I'd never heard of any of the guys running the workshop, but I was like, I need to do a workshop. That sounds great. I need to learn some stuff. And so I show up. I couldn't get hold of a laptop, so I packed up my entire PC, hard drive and monitor, put it in the back of my car, showed up at 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃 with my whole entire computer, and was introduced to these three random guys, Christian Fletcher, Tony Hewitt and Peter Eastway, who are like three of the best of Australia's landscape photographers. And it was an incredible week, and they taught me so much, and it really sparked my passion completely. And, learning from guys like that was so inspiring. So, I stayed in the Kimberley for 10 years almost. And it's really the Kimberley that taught me photography. It's an incredible place. It's very spiritual. It's very beautiful. The colours are like nowhere else on earth.
Quick question.
I was very...
Mieke, can I jump in? I'm interested in a couple of things. I'm interested, number one, was there actually any power at 𝗂𝗏𝗃𝗃 to plug your big computer into? First question.
Well, that was the funny thing, because I actually got the best seat in the house, because the only place that had two like a double thing was this one spot that had like really good lighting. So I was definitely the luckiest person there.
So,
But yeah, we all had like extension cords and power things, and yeah, it was pretty crazy setup.
nice. Are you allowed to tell the story about your first experience of Dale's Gorge and Circular Pool, or are we leaving that out?
No, we won't put that one on record.
Okay.
Because people will think I can actually sing and I can't.
And then I'll
We'll
ask
save
you.
that for another day, Adam.
Well, we could get a quick demo of your voice and everything. No, okay.
No, certainly not.
All right.
No.
Sorry. Keep on going. It's fantastic.
Okay. So yeah, almost 10 years in the Kimberley. And I will mention, along the way, I've always loved shapes and patterns. And that kind of comes into play a little bit later on.
Wow.
So I just always was attracted to nature's patterning. You know, it's like there's a design. It's like, you know, so intricate and so well thought out. It's almost impossible to think that that's like random circumstance. And so I think with all of that, by the time I went on my first helicopter photography flight, which was in 2012, yeah, it blew me away. I went up in the chopper and saw all these shapes and patterns from the air, and it brought in my excitement that I'd always loved adrenaline. With the bobsleigh, with everything, like I'd used to do gymnastics and diving, and like I just always loved that thrill. Flying is the same. I get that same, like every single time that I'm sitting at the airport, sitting on the tarmac, ready to go, the chopper, things going off, like I get that real like frisson of excitement of every time. And so it's not just about the photography for aerial photography. It's that, that really all-consuming body experience, like, oh my God, I'm about to go up, in the air. Woo-hoo. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And you can see, like, that's my first flight and I'm grinning like a Cheshire cat. Thank you very much, Tanya, for that photo. But that's how I feel, and that was on another workshop with Christian in the East Kimberley at Home Valley Station. We flew over the East Kimberley mudflats, and yeah, most of that memory card was out of focus. Truthfully, I just really didn't know what I was doing, but I did get one shot that was worth keeping, and it's definitely one of my.
And this is the one here, is it, Mieke?
Yeah,
it's
beautiful. One of my sentimental favorites. So it's hard to imagine that that's real until you're up there looking at it, but it is.
100%.
It is. So that started, a real passion for aerial photography, and so this was 2014. And then 2015, I was in Broome and went up over. I was fortunate to go on a flight with Nigel Gaunt and 𝗟𝗵𝗄𝗀𝗆𝗄𝗆. Stuart Westmore had visited and they went up in a flight. And then the next day, Nigel and Sheldon invited me to come with them. And I was so excited. I was so excited. And it did not disappoint. And it's just spectacular, the shapes and patterns there. And I've, as I've said, I've always enjoyed abstract, shapes and patterns and stuff. 2015, Tanya and I drove to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙 That was pretty epic. I didn't really have, I don't think I really had the skill then to capture the painted hills well. So I'd love to go back and give that another go at some point in time.
Just a quick drive down to Lake Eyre from the Kimberley, Mieke.
Yeah. The things you do, right?
Yeah. Well, that would have taken you, what, a week or so, wouldn't it? Or
I actually flew across.
Oh, okay.
Tanya was in Darwin, so I flew to Darwin and then we drove down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still a fair drive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of how that all started. And yeah, I just really enjoy looking for the shapes and patterns and colours and textures. And 2017, I went to Namibia and had the opportunity to fly over 𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗄𝗧 there.
Stunning.
But the highlight was the was the flight over 𝗀𝗆𝗆 Bay, and we took off from 𝗀𝗂𝗄𝗆, and that's one of my favorite shots of all of them. We flew over flamingos that were flying over a drained out 𝗀𝗆𝗆 Bay, so that was pretty spectacular. So
couple of quick questions while I got you there.
Yes.
One referring to gear, what's your favorite camera lens combination? I'll give you all the questions in one go. Jane Fraser was interested in how the wet season was in the Kimberley for you up there. And there was one other one as well, asked, when are you getting your pilot's license?
Okay, so first question, my favorite kit to shoot aerial photographs with, I always take 2 cameras, but the one that I almost always have stuck to my head is the Nikon D810 in combination with the Zeiss 100mm.
Nice.
And I just find, you know, that little bit of, you know, because the 100mm is actually a macro lens and it brings everything closer, and that enables me to get that really abstract look. But I also take my D800 and the 50mm, the Nikkor 50mm, which gives you just that little bit extra if in case, you know, you're in too close. And I usually fly at like 1,000 to 2,000 feet. So, you know, it's just as easy to tell the pilot to go up or down as it is, you know. I prefer a manual focus lens because infinity is infinity. And as long as you're high enough off the ground, you don't need to worry about focusing. You can just have the focus ring on infinity all the time and know that it's sharp. So that's a real benefit when you're flying.
Yeah.
What was the second question? I've already forgotten.
Wet season.
Oh, the wet season.
Yep.
The wet season, epic. I wouldn't say I'm a storm photographer because there's some really, really talented Western Australian storm photographers. I think I'm just very lucky that I got to witness some great lightning storms, and because it's so consistent, it just like goes off and goes off and goes off, and you know, you can actually track where that lightning is taking place. You almost can't miss it if you take enough photos.
Yes.
So yeah, I loved the wet season, just the rawness, the energy. You really feel alive. There was one probably stupid night now in hindsight where I really wanted to get the lightning reflected in the water down at the beach. And so, you know, I was all set up with, you know, pushing my tripod down into the sand because the sand was moving, of course, you know, pushing it down and taking, you know, these relatively long exposures, and there's lightning going off in 3 directions. And I'm in the water, you know, and my dog, Banjo, is headbutting the backs of my legs, going, dude, you should not be here. There's lightning everywhere, you know, and he's like literally like trying to round me up and get me back up to safety. And so there were 3 lightning storms, 3 different directions, and then all of a sudden the wind changed. And I was like, okay, gotcha, no more, let's go. And I know that sounds really silly, but I think when you're kind of in tune with nature, you have to listen to those little things. And I knew that the storm was coming towards me, and so I packed up and got to the car just as the deluge happened. And what was the other question?
The last one, when are you getting your pilot's license? And I'll add on to that as well because it will come up for sure. Do you have a drone? Do you do any drone photography?
No, I'd love to have a pilot's license, but you know, with everything else that's going on at the moment, it's highly unlikely that I'll ever have enough time to do that. So a drone, I've never tried, and I got pulled up recently, you know, saying that I didn't think that I'd get as much enjoyment out of flying a drone as actually flying, but I haven't tried it, so I probably shouldn't make statements that kind of make that differentiation, because I don't know, maybe I would enjoy it just as much, but I have trouble believing that without the flying bit I'd get as excited. So I've never used a drone. I really wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about with regards to a drone, and there are some absolutely fantastic photos taken with drones, so I don't think it's an either or situation.
No.
I just personally haven't had a go.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, at the end of 2017, I drove all the way back to Northeast Vic. It was 6,382 k's. And on the way, I stopped at Denham near 𝗀𝗵𝗃 and took some aerial photographs there, some of which you'll see later. But this is where I am now. I'm in Northeast Vic, about here. And yeah, the 10 years in the Kimberley absolutely was a privilege and a pleasure. But I'm here now. This is me. This is 𝗟𝗃 Winery that my mum and dad started in 1989. And those trees, my brother and sister and I, on the left, my brother and sister and I planted them one stinking hot day when Dad had borrowed the neighbour's water cart, and we had to get those trees planted or they were going to not survive. So I don't remember that day very happily, but the experience of it, yeah, I'll always be grateful that Dad had the foresight to get us to do that, because every time I come around the corner and see those autumn trees, it's, you know, pretty special.
Absolutely, it's beautiful.
So I thought I'd mention some of my artistic influences for my abstract aerials. One of them is Wassily Kandinsky, who's a Russian painter and art theorist, and he loved music, and he saw a lot of similarities between music and painting. And the thing I love about his work is it's so precisely balanced. I don't think I've seen another painter that has, it's so exquisite, like there is nothing out of place in his work. You couldn't remove an element without noticing it. And yet there's so much going on. So he, you know, he has a lot to teach about balance. And I just really enjoy the way that he constructs shapes and patterns and colors and makes them feel, you know, right.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I really love Piet Mondrian. He was a Dutch painter and art theorist, and regarded as one of the pioneers of abstract art and one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. His work has been mimicked, but, you know, in fashion and in, you know, lots of different areas. I've got an umbrella of his work. He tried to minimize everything down to vertical and horizontal lines and white, black, yellow, red, and blue. And, you know, when it's so simple, you actually make it very difficult for yourself. How many ways can you present those elements? You know, there is a finite, really quite a finite number of ways you can present that. But he felt that by abstracting everything, it was universal. You know, instead of it being a tree, it's like the vibration that we all feel that represents a tree, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm really heavily influenced by him. One of my favorite artists is 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝗧, and I don't know if you got to go and see his exhibition, but he's just, I think anyone who's had the privilege of being taught 𝗟𝗏 in an art class at school has been like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. Because, you know, the one on the left, one of his famous ones, Waterfall, is actually water going up. You can't tell that it's wrong until you look and go, well, water can't go up. So how is that possible? I love his impossibilities. There's a movie, one of my favorite movies actually, Labyrinth, with David Bowie in it. It's a pretty old movie.
I know it.
But it was based on this relativity scene where, you know, upside down is normal. Like people are walking on floors that become ceilings, and and he was very well known for his tessellations. He was a mathematical genius, really, and he even at the end he wasn't sure whether he should be credited as an artist or a mathematician. He saw, I haven't seen anyone else that's so, where both are equally important, and his work certainly demonstrates that. The op artists, that is a movement that's still continuing today, and I really enjoy the illusion that's created. They tend to do their work in black and white because black and white removes perspective. We can't tell what's foreground and background. And, you know, I quite like that trippiness.
Very trippy.
Yeah, very trippy. And of course, the 𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃 art movement.
Beautiful.
You know, especially having lived in the Kimberley and understanding that the artwork represents place and belonging, and there are some universal symbols, but you know, many of them are quite specific to particular language groups. And yeah, I just think it's incredible how so many different Aboriginal artists depict the Australian landscape from the air.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What do you know about that? Have you got any more experience, or have you spoken to any artists about that depicting from the air?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it should go on record, but someone did say to me once that the old ladies talk about astral travel, and you know, like that sounds really trippy and really out there, but I'm probably not about to turn around and go, well, that's impossible.
Yeah.
So I don't know for sure, but I do think it's fascinating. I mean, obviously, how do people see the land from the air unless you're in the air? Who knows?
Yeah.
You know, pretty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's I've got some of my photos to show. This is Broome and 𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃 Lake Air. In the beginning, I think my work was a bit hectic, but what I really like is simplification. And so as I guess progressed as a aerial photographer, my work started becoming a bit more simplified. What I really love about aerial photography is how it really conveys that nature is an artist, and it's that it's that artistic element of nature that I really respond to. You know, it just looks designed. It doesn't look random.
And the beautiful thing about aerial photography, Mieke, that I find is you could take any lens of any description into the air, whether it be a 400mm zoom or a, you know, even a 20mm wide angle, and you'd just get the most incredible abstract from a different perspective, wouldn't you, in a lot of these places?
Yeah, although, because I know some people do ask, it's a good idea not to take a wide angle lens for aerial photography, because you end up getting the chopper blades and the struts and the, you know, everything. But yeah.
Keep going.
Well, just, you know, just in case anyone's going, oh yeah, I'll take my wide angle.
Yeah.
It's not the best choice.
Yeah, don't waste your money on listening to Adam.
Besides, Adam seems to drop his lenses, so probably best not to take
my advice on aerial photography whatsoever.
Anyway, okay. So I think this really looks like a watercolor painting. You know, that even especially like this bleeding of the color here. To me, it's like rumpled fabric, but it's also painted.
And I can see like dolphins and figures and all sorts of things throughout that. And actually, I will ask you this question as well. One of the things that I like to talk about with abstract photography in particular is the fact that it really is an open invitation for your audience to interpret and see things that aren't necessarily there, because there is no literal interpretation, really. Is that something that you're aware of?
Absolutely. And I think by removing that, I think that's why I specifically like to remove all references to reality, because once you do that, it allows people to stop looking for the literal meaning and instead invites them specifically to look for any kind of metaphorical meaning, you know, or symbolic meaning. You know, because the literal, we're very visual people and we like to figure out what we're looking at. But if you make it so that you can't, then all of a sudden you try to make sense of it in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what like yourself, that's what I love about aerial photography.
So this one to me, like, I see Roman figures. Like I see masculine, muscly men in this photo, you know.
Yeah, I can see the female form over towards the left. Yeah, and the male form on the right for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And again, I just think that really looks like a watercolor painting. Lots of people don't believe that that's a photograph, and it's not heavily manipulated.
Where is
Well, in
this
fact,
one?
it's the only thing I've really done is the ground was a bit darker, so I've lightened it, but you know, it is exactly like that.
Spectacular.
So this is the same location as the previous photograph. This is Lake Tekapo in New Zealand, and I actually went on a family trip there with my dad and family, and we flew as a birthday treat, flew over Lake Tekapo and out to the Fox Glacier. And as we were coming back, we went over this location, and I didn't even know that there were braided rivers in New Zealand. And I was just raving about this. I was like, oh my God, did you see that? That was incredible. Like, I only thought that existed in Iceland, and wow, you know. And by the time we'd driven all the way back to Wanaka, which was where we were staying, John said, I think you need to go back. Because I'd spent just going on and on and on. So I rang and said, you know, would it be possible to charter a flight? And they were a little bit reluctant, actually, because I think they'd had some experiences where people didn't know what to do with their camera settings. And as you know, like it is quite specialized, and you can end up with a full card of blurry photos. And so they, you know, checked that I was legit and that I did know what I was doing. And then, yeah, I took a chartered flight. And this is actually a 3-photo pano stitch. And it's one of the ones that received a gold in the Pano Award.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But yeah, the fascinating thing for me is that it looks like a volcano, but it looks like the roots are going down. But actually the water's going out. So it's that whole, and I think that's why I like 𝗟𝗃𝗃 so much. It's that whole, you know, not sure what you're looking at, illusion, you know. It's the question marks. I really like the question marks.
Absolutely.
And this is another one from Lake Tekapo, and I just think the colors are just crazy, really crazy.
Yeah, the simplicity is incredible. Yeah,
so the next few of them are quite simple. This is one of my favorites still. That was 𝗟𝗏𝗏 𝗬𝗏𝗃, and there's almost nothing going on there.
Almost reminds me of a Rothko painting.
Pardon?
Almost reminds me of a Rothko abstract painting.
Yeah. And to me, it also harks back to Mondrian. You know, the simplicity. You're distilling everything down to just lines and blocks of color. And the detail on the mud flats is insane. Like when you zoom in on this, it's just incredible how detailed. Like it, you know, the cracks. Mad. I'd love to see this printed big one day. I think without the detail, you can't really get the full impact. And then you would know this area. This is my favorite named place ever. Useless Loop. It's a salt mine near 𝗟𝗏𝗃, and they actually mine the salt. So they get a tractor. They fill the lake then with salt water, then they drain the lake, and then they get a big tractor and they scoop up all the salt. And as you can see, the area on the right is more textured than the area on the left. And that means that it has been harvested more recently. So the area on the left has had time for those tractor lines to disappear.
Sure. Quick question. Do you do much abstract photography on the ground? You kind of answered this in the beginning, so I think I know the answer, but do you do much abstract on the ground?
I haven't recently, but with my upcoming workshops, because I'm doing one for Nikon with an intro abstract photography class, and I'm also doing an in-depth abstract one with my own groups. You know, not everyone can go up in a helicopter or a plane or even get a drone. So yeah, I've definitely spent a lot of time recently, particularly this week, creating abstracts. So I've done
Great.
I've had some fun with oil and water, with milk and food dye, with you know, leaves, finding patterns in rocks and in dirt, and you know, it's everywhere. If you really look, there's patterns everywhere.
Oh, great. And is that macro abstract workshop on your website?
It is.
Oh, cool,
Yes.
cool.
And again, I guess this one probably doesn't convey, you really need to see the print, the detail. There's cracked mud all on the edge of this bit here. But, you know, just in terms of even the colors, it's so unusual to find stuff like that in nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is not a monochrome. This is a color photograph.
Wow.
But yeah. But it's wet mud and dry mud, and it's that, you know, grey, boring mud. But what I really love about this is the tension between the two. So to me, I've called it separation, but you know, it's light and dark, it's goodness and not. You know, it's that tension. It's all about that jagged line dividing them.
That's incredible.
But you know, there's not one without the other. So if it was just a photo of one, not the other, it would be boring as anything. It's the tension between the two that creates the interest.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of symbolic. This is one of my favorites. I know you know this, there are dinosaur footprints all along the Kimberley coast. It's pretty amazing. I always kind of put dinosaurs in a bucket with unicorns and you know, Pegasus. You didn't really like, they're mythical creatures in a way. And so actually seeing a dinosaur footprint for the first time really blew my head off. You know, I just never really thought of them as real animals, you know, and being able to touch a place that a dinosaur left a footprint really kind of makes you realize that your world is quite small. You know, there's so much of our world that you know, our heads really don't get around very easily. And anyway, there's one of the amazing things is that the footprints have a story, a songline. They're part of a songline, and it's about Marala, who's the emu man. And obviously, I'm not privy to the details of that. But it is a well-known songline. And so, to me, this photograph kind of has Marala in it. It has the dinosaurs in it. It has, you know, the whole Kimberley. Like, it's got resonances from all different directions. It's one of the photos where I was so tempted to flip it, both horizontally and vertically, because we read from left to right, and you know, the flow from left to right would seem more natural. But then at some point in time, you've got to ask yourself, what's more important, the image or the truthfulness of it? And in this particular instance, all of that resonance kind of disappears if it's not real, if that makes sense. So
sure,
it's actually the reality of the whole thing that I like. So I kept it that way.
Makes sense.
Now this one I just think is nuts. It looks like one layer is hovering over another layer, which it's not. It's completely flat. It's just that there's mud. And again, you know, going back to 𝗟𝗃, I just love the question mark. What am I seeing here? You know, what is it? How is that possible that it's one layer? Because to me, this area here, I cannot see this as one layer. My brain refuses to see it as one layer. It insists to me that one layer is floating.
And then you have the Escher-esque type nature of that, those two little bits that are bleeding into the upper layer down below. So they look like they're on top, and then the ones up on the left look like they're underneath. Well, at least to me they do. So you've got that up and down nature. Yeah, that one there.
Yeah. yeah, your brain just goes back and forth and, you know, goes, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is crazy. What are you doing to me? So this one to me looks like a layer of soil floating above an underlying layer of water. And the thing that got me is I've always loved a particular Escher print that kind of depicts the same thing, because it's like you don't know whether you're looking into another world below, or if, I mean, obviously it's a reflection of what's above, but he was great at depicting that confusion. So I always like to find those resonances. This was the Hunter River, and, you know, just create, like, how is that not created? You know, that's just random patterns, but it's not, it's beautiful. And this is the same area. And again, I was like, I've seen something like that before. And I went back to my art books, and turns out that's what I see. 𝗀𝗃𝗃. You know, he's can you see it? There's a figure there. There's a head. And like, yeah, it's only a little bit, but that's why I love the fact that aerials, abstract aerials, you can just read whatever you want into it. There's no right or wrong. No one can tell me you don't see that. I do see it, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I've got a series of my Iceland photos. So Tanya and I really went not for landscapes, we went for aerials, and we had 2 amazing flights. And I had hoped that the aerials would be as spectacular as what I'd seen, but I was not prepared for, just really incredible. The colors, the textures, the shapes. You can't believe it until you see it for yourself. This one's one of my favorites. I definitely see a love heart.
Yeah.
And I also see the face of a woman. So it's a stylized face, but she's looking down here.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can get
So
the
I
hint
see
of
a
that.
face within a heart. So, you know, the broken heart, love lost. This, I see a phoenix. So I see like a wing. I see a, you know, winged creature rising. Doesn't mean it's there, just means that's what I see.
It's beautiful. I love the colors.
Well, the colors there,
So rich.
yeah, they're pretty crazy. So the sand is black, and the glacial, what happens is as the glacier comes down, it grinds up the rock at the bottom, and the sediment is carried out towards the ocean, and the sediment is actually what refracts the light differently. So you get more of the blue-green end of the spectrum naturally, and that's what you see with the New Zealand photos. And then when that water interacts with sulfur, you get the yellow, and when it interacts with iron, you get the red. So you just get this insane variety of color. And then this one, you would recognize this one, Adam.
I do. I love this
This
one.
one is called Dragonfire, and I actually entered it in the state AIPP awards, and no one mentioned a dragon, so clearly they didn't see it, but I'm going to point it out. So here's the eye with the eyebrow, and there's the nose. It's in profile. There's a big open mouth and a chin, and then it's breathing fire, and this is like the body.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I've always...
Yeah, so no one saw him. No one, well, if they did, they didn't. And I was really disappointed. I was like, oh my gosh, no one saw the dragon, you know?
Okay. I'm looking forward
to... So then
to...
when I did enter the panel awards, I actually squashed this. I squashed it so that it was like half the size, so that you couldn't miss the dragon. Right. So by compressing it, it made it long. Yeah. And so everyone, well, most people saw the dragon then. But, you know, I guess the moral of the story is, if you love a picture and you believe in a picture, don't be disappointed if people don't see what you see in it. You know, sometimes you're so close to it and so connected to it that you just see it instantly. Like, I think once you see the dragon, you can't not see the dragon. Like, you can't go back to seeing it just as a pretty abstract. You see that there's a dragon,
Mm.
but until you've seen it the first time, it's just shapes and patterns. And I guess, yeah, especially with competitions, I think people get really disappointed, you know, when they don't get the feedback that they want. But sometimes you are too close and you're seeing all the nuances because you know it so well. And sometimes you just have to accept that, you know, people have to sit with an artwork, maybe see it printed, you know, interact with it. And that's not the environment that people judge in. You know, you've got a limited amount of time when you're judging. You get your first impression, and that's what you get. So to anyone out there who's disappointed with the way that other people see their work, you know, just don't be too disheartened. Sometimes, you know, it's just the circumstances.
No, I love this. The colors, the blacks, the contrast, it's amazing. And I opened the print the other day, Mieke, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to hang it on the wall.
Yay!
It's gorgeous.
So this one's another one from Iceland, and I instantly saw a love heart. But after the disappointment of no one seeing my dragon, I thought, well, I need to make sure I hit people over the head with it. So that's why I edited it, so that you can not miss the heart. And I try really hard not to manipulate my photos because, as I said, it's very much for me about honouring nature. But in this instance, I really didn't think everyone was going to see the heart. So yeah, I had to, and this actually has special meaning for me because I've got two dads, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very lucky to have two dads.
Yeah, me too.
One of my dads had open heart surgery, and I was working on this at around the time that was happening, and it just made me very aware of how interconnected everything is. But the heart is at the center of everything. You know, the heart is our humanity, and you know, without a heart, you got nothing.
Yes, exactly.
Both metaphorically and physically. So yeah, this is a very special photo for me.
It's beautiful.
And this one, you would recognize the pink, 𝗟𝗏𝗏 𝗧𝗶𝗺. But what I really like about this is 𝗟𝗏𝗏 is also known not just for aerial photography, but for its insane explosion of wildlife, of birds, when the lake fills. And this to me is a bird. There's a beak and a breast and the wing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In flight.
And so to me it represents all of that. And then the Kimberley is pretty well known for its classic leaf-like fractal patterns, but this one is pretty near perfect, I think, you know, especially with this halo around it here.
I love how
it's just amazing for aerial photography.
I love how some of these mud flat images also look inverted in the fact that the water seems to be sitting and rising above from the landscape rather than being indented below it.
Yeah, your brain does crazy things.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And you know, the colors are just crazy. That's real. To me, that's a fish.
Yeah.
Diving down. Now this one I included not because, like, this one everyone will see something different in this photo. That's what I like about it. You know, plenty of people, maybe they're putting it in the comments, I don't know, but you can see so much, like frothy milk, coffee. I can't. Someone said
there's a face in the middle on the black side there for sure.
Now I'm looking.
Kind of central.
But what I instantly saw. So this is the bison from Spain, and then if you flip it back to front, that's him right there.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see it now.
I might be stretching a little, but you know.
Well, that's the beauty of abstract, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is 𝗀𝗃𝗲𝗄𝗃 and I just see a dot painting completely, you know, unequivocally. It's just, it's so much like an Indigenous dot painting. The red earth is actually sand with a high iron content, and so it's actually rusted, whereas the clay pan is gypsum, and that links back to when the water table was higher, or not water table, the ocean was higher, and there are certain landlocked areas that used to be saline lakes, and so I've got a few pictures of that. To me, that's like a sun, you know, up in the top left.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
I was a kid, I'd always draw the sun top left of the picture.
Very much so.
And that's, to me, an hourglass, the passing of time, which obviously any Indigenous place is, you know, that's a big element. But my favourite one is this one. And the crazy thing about these circular pools that are called burritas is that they actually harbour suspended life. So it's got the eggs of little crabs and fish and all sorts of stuff. And so when they get the monsoonal rain, those lakes fill and actually explode with life. So not only is it like an egg, but it actually has eggs in it, which I think is very cool.
That is very cool.
This one is actually a tailings dam, and it's kind of like the Scream, I think.
Actually, that image is not coming up. Can I get you to unshare and reshare, Mieke? It's just got a bit of lag.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
So you got it now?
It's coming through. Here it comes. I've got a black screen at the moment.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's just a bit of lag with those generating. That's fine. That's fine. We can wait.
Okay.
I've got it.
Cool. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, I've seen this. I've never seen it, never been there before, but I've seen this. And it actually strongly reminds me of this, The Great Wave off Kanagawa by Hokusai.
Ah, yeah.
And I just love how, you know, nature is an artist, I guess is my point. And it's my privilege to try and capture the art that it creates.
Spot on.
And this is actually the last one that I'll be sharing. So hopefully that's about right.
Oh, we've got a lot of, I don't even know, time's flying. I'm sure everyone's having a great time. I'm just absolutely enjoying every moment. But we've got a bunch of questions which we'll flick through.
Well, can I just finish on this one?
Please, sorry.
And then I'll like show my face and do questions?
Please.
Yeah? Okay. So when I was in New Zealand, I also took a flight over the 𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃 river system near Lake Wanaka. And I flew at sunrise, so you've got your cool blues of the pre-dawn, but then you've also got the reflection of the light hitting the surrounding mountainside, which is that orange glow. And I didn't see it at the time, but I was showing my mum the photos and she's like, I see a face. And then it hit me, like really took my breath away. I was like, yeah, there's definitely a face in there. And the interesting thing about that area is that it's one of the only known locations of a Maori pa, which was their fortified living arrangement. And the 𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃 River is named after a chief called 𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃. And yeah, maybe I like to read into things and I'm a bit fanciful, but to me that's the chief 𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃, and he's holding some kind of implement here. He's got a top knot. There's his nose and his eyes.
It's incredible.
So yeah, I felt quite privileged to see that.
Yeah, it's rendered so incredibly. Like I didn't see it initially, and then all of a sudden it just snaps in, and it was one of those ones. Once you have seen it, you can't see anything else.
No, you can't go back to not seeing it.
Almost has a slightly Salvador Dali almost self-portrait feel to it. Like that was the first thing the moustache is not there, but the facial features remind me of Salvador Dali a little bit.
He's
Anyway.
another of my favorite artists.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, just quickly I'll mention, and then we'll do the questions for the rest of the time in case people leave. But social media, I'm Mieke Boynton Photography. My website is miekeboynton.com. I have my prints on the website and my workshops, and I also have a site on Redbubble. You have to put in redbubble.com and then people Mieke B. I don't sell all the mugs and the coasters and the bath mats and the socks, but I do have my work as canvas prints, metal prints, cards, and straight prints. And so there's my workshops: black and white photography essentials, composition in landscape photography, waterfall, seascapes and long exposure photography, abstract photography, and this weekend I've got photography basics. I also am doing an upcoming 1-hour workshop with Nikon School about abstract photography, and coming soon, as I mentioned earlier, I'll put in dates for June workshops. I'm going to have a print sale. I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to sell my books and 2021 calendars on Facebook. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was absolute. I loved every second of it. I was just lost in all of your photos there and seeing all these different things and abstracts, and took me back to my childhood at, looking up at the clouds and seeing, different faces and animals and this and that. So loved every minute of it. The time flew by. I don't even know. We've been going an hour and 20 minutes and it feels like you've just been talking 5 minutes. Okay, just a quick one. Guys, if you had a question and it got missed, and I'll share the screen a little bit differently. Although we should have left you as the big feature artist because you're much more beautiful than I am.
Whatever.
Guys, if you had a question and it got missed, put it in the comments now. We'll do questions for probably about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll scroll back and grab it for you. But if you had one and it got missed, then put it down the bottom again and we'll go from there. And of course, hit the like button. Let's see if we can hit that record. Mieke, you're nearly at 400 viewers at the moment, which is absolutely phenomenal. Everyone's loving it. Hit the like button.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back a little bit. There were some questions that I missed. I know there was one, I can't remember who asked it, but they asked, how do you do a panoramic photograph from a helicopter or a plane? What's that process?
Okay, so that can be tricky, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on how the pilot is flying. So the thing with panos is there needs to be enough overlap, and provided there's enough overlap, then Photoshop can figure out where it fits.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just like a normal panorama. It's just that, like if you're flying straight, it's easy. You just take a series.
Yeah.
But if you're circling, sometimes that can be a little bit more tricky. But as long as there's an overlap and Photoshop can tell where that intersection point is. So the general rule is if you've got a third of it or more overlapped, then you're pretty good to go.
Yeah.
Less than that, and it's going to be really hard for it to pick up where that, where they match.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to take them quickly, basically.
Yeah.
So there has to be a series, right close together.
And that can be that technique can be pretty handy when you're shooting with like 100mm or even a 200mm fixed prime lens, and you see something that you're going past, but it doesn't fit in the frame. And you can sort of take those 4 or 8 frames or something and get everything and stitch it later, can't you?
The expert on this is 𝗟𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗡.
Okay.
Almost all of her photos are pano stitched. You wouldn't know because she doesn't do it as a panorama, but it's like crazy number of images that she puts together, and that means she can blow them up to like 2 meters without an issue. So yeah, she's really the expert on that. I'm just a bit of a hack.
Okay, Jane Fraser asked, what month of the year did you go to Iceland, or is there a better month to go to that northern, part of the world?
I went in September, but only because I was judging a big salon in Germany, and that was the only time that I could take off to do the both. I have never been to Iceland any other time. I would love to go to Iceland when there's snow. I couldn't answer that definitively because I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you went on TripAdvisor, there's like a million people who've answered that question. In terms of flying, though, the more temperamental the weather gets, the less likely you're going to be able to fly, because obviously when the wind comes up, it's just too dangerous to fly. So,
Yeah.
and if there's no light, so what we really noticed is if it's overcast, you just don't get the dimensionality. When you've actually got some sunlight, that's when the braided rivers really pop in terms of their dimensionality.
Sure. With the northern lights, it's generally better at a certain time of the year, or can you get the northern lights any time of the year?
No, up in the Arctic Circle, basically the sunlight. So during winter, like December, January, they don't get direct. They don't see the sun at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't rise over the horizon, and therefore you get like 4 hours of twilight light, and then the rest of the day and night is midnight. So it's like midnight at 3 p.m. And so during the night, obviously, as soon as there's auroral activity, you will see it. Whereas if you go in the middle of the year in the summertime, it's midnight sun.
Oh, so no dark.
There is no night. So you're definitely not going to see the aurora when the sun's in the sky 24/7. So up in the Arctic Circle, that's really important that you go when there's enough night time to see the aurora. But obviously in wintertime, it's pretty difficult to travel up there. You've got to have winter tires, and sometimes you can get snowed in. They're amazing though. Like when you think about a country that's kind of got snow and no light for several months of the year, they still manage to do everything. Like they're very resourceful people, and they just deal with this incredible extreme range of light and weather. I really respect the Norwegians. I think they're amazing.
Do they have those giant monster truck things with the giant wheels on them for the snow? Have you been in one of those?
I haven't seen any, but you know what? Even my friends Elizabeth, they just have a little blower. They have this thing that just and the snow goes streaming off out the side, and they make themselves a path, and they drive out on their little path.
Away you go.
Crazy.
Awesome. Tell us. I'm interested, and who made this one? Graham asks, what is your basic post-processing workflow? Have you got a specific workflow that you follow? Is it Lightroom, Photoshop, other?
I've actually never used Lightroom. I keep meaning to give it a go, and I've put it on my to-do list because I'm now doing one-on-one tutorial sessions, and I know that a lot of people use Lightroom, so I'm determined. I may well buy your course, Adam, so I can teach myself Lightroom. But because I'm a librarian in one of my careers, I never felt that I needed to catalogue.
Sure.
I felt that my own cataloguing was fine. I am regretting that a little now, because it would be very handy to type in a keyword and to bring up, everything that was abstract without having to go searching for it. But anyway, no, I've only ever used Photoshop. I use Adobe Camera Raw to do my basic raw processing, and my workflow is quite similar to yours. I have a preset already locked in that basically almost does everything, which I then tweak. That I don't spend long in Adobe Camera Raw. That's very quick, straight through to Photoshop. And then because I'm a hack, and because I've just learned bits and pieces from here, there, and everywhere, and I'm not really like any particular workflow, I just look at the picture itself and go, what does this picture need for it to look like what I saw it? So I am not the person to teach Photoshop. You're the person to teach Photoshop, because mine's very haphazard, very random. And it's basically just, to me, ensuring that the light is right, not just the exposure, but that you can see the main elements, and that those main elements are given emphasis through good light. That's a big consideration. I used to process a little bit more heavily. I used Nik tonal tonal contrast quite
Oh
a
yeah,
lot in my
yeah.
earlier days. And these days I'm like, it's so contrasty. It's like really poof in your face, boof, like,
Yeah.
oh. And now I'm like, no, I like it to be a little more subtle. So I don't use Nik much at all anymore, except for their 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗍, which is a great program.
Love it.
I do a lot with their black and white processing, but essentially it's just Photoshop and it's just tweaking curves like what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just really depends on the photograph.
100%.
So, for example, you know, the one that you looked at with the Saharan dunes,
yes,
I knew instantly that a single shot wasn't going to cut it. So then, you know, I had to find the right photos so that it matched up properly. And, you know, so sometimes it takes a few hours, sometimes it only takes 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's funny, actually. I think it's a kind of a rite of passage for photographers, isn't it, to have that high contrast period in their photography. We all go through it where we're like, wow, that looks amazing.
Wow, I know, it looks so different.
And we go,
oh,
you know,
that's so cool.
and then eventually we find
like, ew.
Yeah, we find our subtlety at some point, don't we? Yeah. Well, some would argue that I still haven't found my subtlety, but anyway, that's another story. That's another story. I can't. Oh, Greg asks, time of the day for aerial photography. Is there a time when you would prefer to be flying?
Great question. So I think when you're first starting out and you know your camera skills aren't finely honed, middle of the day aerial photography is best, because the most important thing is you can get a high shutter speed. And if you bump your ISO too high, you essentially lose all your detail. So you're really limited by how high you can put your ISO and how fast your shutter speed is. So the middle of the day is always going to be more reliable. A handy hint is most cameras have auto ISO settings where you can set a minimum shutter speed and a maximum ISO, and then your camera will work within those parameters. So I set my minimum shutter speed as 1/1000th, which is always going to be sharp, and my maximum ISO is 3200, because for my camera, that's about as high as I can go without a loss of detail. But obviously for your, you know, everyone's camera is different and has different ISO capability. So it really depends on your camera, and you need to do your own research for your own equipment. But that certainly helps. As you get more experienced, obviously the low light at sunrise and sunset creates great shadow, and that's where you get really nice depth. So it really depends what you're trying to achieve. If a flat photo isn't an issue, then middle of the day aerial photography is fine. If you want that dimensionality, then, you know, and your skills are, you're confident enough with your settings, then sunrise and sunset can often create some great shadows, you know, like trees with long shadows and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm only new to aerial photography, or relatively inexperienced, and I heard you mention this before as well, but I think everyone is going to mess up a few shoots along the way, aren't they, and come back and be terribly disappointed with all these blurry photos. And I did it just recently at the Black and Blue project with the Light Collective. My first flight, I took a couple of thousand images, got back, they were all blurry, but that made me go again the next day. And me and Paul went out the next day and we got the best shots. So sometimes these things, you know, they sort of work out. They're meant to be sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, I do think so, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was another one. Oh, for your landscape on the ground photography, do you generally fall back to wide angle lenses? I know you do a lot of macro as well. Tell us a little bit.
Not macro for landscape.
No? Okay.
No.
For abstract?
Pretty much, like I was trying to find some, because I actually almost always have my Nikkor 2470 on the camera with a polarizer. Like that's just, you know, the kit that I go out with most of the time. But what I've actually found is my most striking images are almost all wide angles. And so I've got a 21mm wide angle and a 15mm, and the 15mm is fantastic for night photography when you want to try and get the whole Milky Way in, or the aurora, you know, the big skies. The 15mm is fantastic. But if you're not going to shoot big skies, then the 15mm is just too big, you know, because every subject in your photo is just it's going to look tiny. So the 21 is just that little bit wider than the 2470, and I've often found that I'll compose with the 2470 and it's just too tight. Put on the 21, good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, I love the 21 as well. Absolutely. That just stuck on my camera almost permanently, that 21. Beverly says, Miike's work just blows me away. Absolutely, it's blowing everyone away. Craig George says, and we touched on this, but we'll touch on it again, right on the end. Any drone photography, or would you consider drone photography in the future?
I think as long as I can save up enough to fly, I will always choose to fly. And actually, I would prefer a helicopter. I just like the setup better and being able to shoot through that whole big door. Because you take the doors off and you've got a much bigger space. You can also really easily maneuver. But I have done a fair bit in planes now, and I have to say a funny story. So when I flew over 𝗀𝗃𝗃 I made the mistake of saying to the pilot, that I really had hoped for a helicopter, but no one had a helicopter. And he took it as a personal challenge. And he spent the entire 90 minutes doing like this.
Oh, wow.
And after 90 minutes of that, I felt sick as a dog.
I know. I mean, tell us, for those that have never done aerial photography, or particularly aerial with the doors off, tell us the feeling when you are inverted in a plane or hanging out the side of a helicopter and you're just relying on this little piece of, your
tiny little
seatbelt.
strap.
There's no harness generally, is there? You're just sort of relying on this little buckle. And if in some of the planes, I've accidentally unflicked the buckle several times before, as you probably have as well, and you're just sort of leaning out the window at 3,000 feet. Tell us about that. It's pretty nerve-wracking,
Well,
isn't it?
It's scary, and I love it. I mean, part of the reason I enjoy it is because of that, that element of risk. But I know some people are really terrified of that idea. So you wouldn't probably want to take the doors off. You're terrified. But yeah, I really enjoy that feeling. But yeah, you are to a certain extent risking your life every time you go up, really, with that tiny little seatbelt. And yeah, it is easy to flick off actually, because it's just like the seatbelt on a plane. It's just like click, open it is. But I have heard that you can't fall out of a helicopter. My understanding is that the pressure of it, or whatever it is, will keep you in unless you're actually like
purposefully.
No one has accidentally fallen out of a helicopter as far as I know. I don't think you can. I think you have to jump out of a helicopter.
All right. Well, okay. All right. Don't try that at home, people. But
No.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. There was a question, I'm looking for who it was, about the paper that you like to print on your aerial work. I can't see the name, but what paper is your favorite for aerial or your photography in general?
I actually have three. I really like Epson's Hot Press Bright, which is a smooth textured rag, but it's very similar to Cansen's Rag Photographic, which is also very similar to the 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗃, what do they call it? Photo rag, I think.
Yeah, I love all them too.
So 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗃, is that how you say it?
No idea. You know me and pronouncing anything. So.
Well, whatever that one is German, and it doesn't look very easy to say.
We know what you mean.
There's those three, and they're all quite they're quite cool. They're not warm. They're quite cool paper types, and just lightly textured. So the texture doesn't take over, but the texture is. The person who asked may have seen my my Skyview exhibition in Ballarat, because I did an exhibition of my aerials there last year, and I have to do a shout out to Fairbanks Eye Gallery, who allowed me to exhibit in their beautiful space. I don't know if they're listening or not, but if you are, Peter, g'day. But I hung the prints so that you could actually see the texture of the paper. It wasn't behind any glass or anything like that, just like you guys did with your exhibition with the Light Collective. And the paper really allows you to showcase those details. And it really is, yeah, it's very beautiful. So printing, I used to think printing was just expensive, full stop. That's as much as I gave, thought to printing. But these days, after joining the AIPP and seeing what's possible with printing and having the opportunity to print my own, and realizing how much of a journey it is to learn to print at home, and how frustrating and tedious it is in the beginning, and then finally being able to come up with consistent prints that what you're seeing is going to come out the other end and all that kind of stuff. It's a very rewarding process. And I'm happy to try different paper types. No one's sponsoring me, so I can tell you exactly what I like. But yeah, Epson's Hot Press Bright is probably my favourite. But yeah, the other two, I have been using the Kandinsky rag photographic a fair bit too. So yeah.
Yeah, just on that, just to expand a little bit, if I'm a new photographer, maybe a couple of years in, should I print my work or should I wait till I'm good or better? Is there a certain time when we should wait, or should we just print?
Well, all I can say is my own experience, but I went to the markets every Saturday in Derby and then in Broome, which is a much bigger market. But I had a little Canon 𝗃𝗃𝗧𝗂𝗧 printer. It was nothing fancy, but you certainly have a different appreciation for your work as a printed product. And it will teach you more about your own photography when you see it printed. You spend more time looking at a printed image than a digital image. And there's something, you pick up more of the details and the flaws, I think, in a printed image. So no, I don't think you should wait. If you're not going to be printing regularly, then it's a silly idea to get a printer because they do tend to clog up. So purely from a practical point of view, if you're going to print, then print regularly. If you're not going to print regularly, then yeah, take it to a photo lab. There's heaps of great ones around.
Yeah.
There's plenty at the moment with online services. So you send in your digital file and it's probably better to learn for yourself, because then you can go out, like the most common comment when people first start printing is the prints are coming out too dark. That's probably the biggest issue for 90% of people, and that's because your color screen, your monitor, chances are it's not calibrated. And the people who create monitors go, well, we want photos to look light and bright and beautiful, and so your photos look light and bright and beautiful.
Absolutely.
But that's not the reality. So when you go to print it, it looks dull and boring. And there's color profiling. There's the difference between Adobe RGB and sRGB, and there's so many different but just have a go. Yeah, if you've got the opportunity to even give away your prints for Christmas presents or whatever, it's worth tackling, and having a go. And look, there's so much information on YouTube. If you really want to learn, all you have to do is type in why is my print dark, and you can watch like 50 different explanations of how to go about it and find the one that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all been through that period, and it's a whole other skill, isn't it? But
yeah,
I think
yeah, I think it's probably just as much learning to print as to use Photoshop.
Yeah, or use your camera or anything like that. But you can, as you said, you can find a really great pro photography lab, and take your photos in and ask them, look, do you think this is going to print up as good as I hope it's going to be? And they'll say, well, let's have a look. And they'll take you through and show you on their calibrated screens what they think it's going to look like. And that's how I started, with a great pro lab like that. I could take my images down there, they'd bring them up. Oh, I think that's going to be a bit too dark, Adam. Oh, yep, cool, all right, let's brighten it up. And they'd come back, and they would generally be pretty nice. But if you don't have a lab that's that kind of supportive, you are going to maybe get some disappointing results early. Yeah. Let's see if there's any more. Peter says, which is a nice little tip, that when he was flying with Shark Bay Aviation, they actually taped his belt buckle up. I've never had that experience, but it sounds like a good idea. Sometimes, sometimes I get a smaller print done to check the color. Absolutely, proof those prints first. Getting a good printer paper profile is key. That's good advice too. Send an email to 𝗏𝗚𝗚. He's the best in the business for print profiling. And I haven't done that myself yet. I've been really lazy. My printer is not profiled and I've been sort of hacking it to get the results that I want at the moment, but I need to get in contact with Les and get a profile. Okay, Mieke, I think that's probably it. Thank you so much for your time, and you donate your time for free, and it's incredible and entertaining everyone and inspiring everyone with your photography. I will just say before I give it back to you for the final word that be sure to check out the description below with all of Miike's details. Give her a follow on Facebook, a follow on Instagram. Check out the rest of her work on her website. And if you're interested in learning from Mieke, she has those incredible workshops as well, online workshops at the moment. Thank you once again for all your time and all your incredible stories and images. I'll leave it with you to say goodbye and wrap it up.
Well, thank you, Adam. And I will quickly mention also that the Pano Awards are open again for this year. I'm thrilled to be invited to judge the amateur section this year, so I'm very excited about that. But that's open now. So if you're thinking about doing some Pano work, now's the time to put them together. But Adam, it was such a privilege to be invited by you, and I love what you do. I love your work and I love your generosity, and I think you're the best teacher of Photoshop out there. I've done your courses, I've told you that, and you know, I just think to be able to simplify such a complicated program is a real skill. So hat off to you. But yeah, thank you to however many people joined us this morning. I haven't seen anyone, which is kind of I would love to see everyone, but on the other hand, I was really nervous about this morning, so I'm kind of like not so upset that I'm not seeing everyone. But I'm very grateful to everyone who took the time to tune in today, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. So.
Oh, we did, and I'm sure they did. The comments are going crazy. They're all saying thank you, and they had a great time. So thank you. I'll turn the stream off here. Stay there, Mieke, and we'll have a chat. But thanks everyone for watching. Hit the like button. Make sure we tell YouTube how incredible this presentation was. If you're new, be sure to hit the subscribe button, get notifications. We do this really regularly. And I'll see you tomorrow morning again. Same time, same place. Thanks, Mieke.